fellas, and welcome back to day 2 of Dawntrail's story. My god, another 5 or 6 hours played. There were some tech issues at Twitch's end, so we didn't get a full day in. But still, I have 2 big points to talk about today. 2 big points. Let's talk about the overall story first, and Wuk Lamat's maturing. She's matured now. She's still headstrong, but they have told us there was a huge exposition scene, which after you completed the first couple of zones, they gave us a big exposition scene where finally Wuk Lamat takes some sage advice from the Scions, who are literally the most veteran fighters and eclectic mix of people that you're likely to find, who have been through more adventures and events and experiences than most people ever will in their entire lives. And Kryl was great here to really push Wuk Lamat to be like, this whole bull nonsense of you pretending to be like invulnerable and immortal to all things and have no weaknesses is preposterous and stupid, and nobody buys it. It very much reminded me of my kids again, of when they're like, no I didn't, no I'm not sick, no I'm tough, and all this kind of stuff. And I educated the quick, I was like, just to let you know, even if your friends don't push back on this, nobody believes you. Nobody believes you. Like, we all know it's garbage. I'm sure some of you must have had friends, or maybe you are that friend, who for some reason is just a perpetual liar about the stupidest things. Like, nothing big, but like really stupid stuff. Like, did you drop this on the floor? No. And it's blatantly you. It's so obviously just like most nonsensical things. Oh, went out last night and got into a fight. Did you? Why? And then you can see that, like, they didn't think past that first comment. They were just telling a story or trying to borrow somebody's story that they've seen on social media or wherever and tried to twist themselves into it to make themselves seem cooler. Maybe they're trying to impress somebody. And you're just like, okay, sure. And some people, I've regularly had friends like this who sometimes you just don't push back because you like the person. It's fine. They do this. They don't even probably know why they're doing it or whatever. And it's just dumb. And Wuk Lamat has been doing that. I guess it's still not forgivable in my eyes, the whole contrived vomiting every time she seemingly puts paw to water. Immediately starts vomiting everywhere, which came back again. I was like, oh god, can we be done with this? But they used this as the example of like, we all know you're sick, it's fine, you don't like it, you can accept it, it's all good, you don't need to be this impenetrable shield if you want to be leader. Leaders have flaws too. That's why they have people who counsel them and give advice and all this. And Wuk Lamat promises us. Now, I don't buy that until I always say actions speak much louder than words. So we will see. She's still headstrong because immediately after this conversation, she charges off into some sort of battle or some situation that needs resolving. So that's not going to change, but hopefully her attitude and things like that. Whether they'll just ease up on the level of naivety and ignorance a little bit, that would be nice. That would be nice. Although they did, again, this is why the second point I'm going to make today is kind of counters what I'm saying. Is we do have a lot of faith in FF14's ability to tell stories. It is the foundation of the game. Each of the major MMO players has something that defines them and makes them the best in slot of their genre and their class, right? So for WoW, it's its combat. If WoW suddenly had awful netcode and its combat like massively slowed down and it was like, oh, okay, like the whole game would shamble and fall apart. And I'm sure when you talk to FF14 newcomers or you're trying to tempt people in, you probably point towards the story, right? It is the foundation. It is the pinnacle of not only MMO storytelling, but it's very high up there in RPG storytelling as well. And yes, there's savage raiding, ultimate raiding, there's dungeons, there's glam, there's housing, there's treasure maps, there's all these things. They're all there, but if the story went away, that would crumble right quick, because that's the foundation and that's what it's best at. So we do have faith in them, and we have this lovely confrontation with Daddy, where he openly agrees with you that Wuk Lamat is not ready to lead, and this is the whole point of the adventure for all the children. Whether he's sheltered them a bit too much throughout their life seems to be coming through, and now they need to get out there and experience things and understand the people, which is what we've been doing. We talked about that yesterday, right? And that is continuing to go on. But he agrees they're not ready to lead. And the likelihood is we're starting to see some things take shape now, especially with Kona. Whether this will apply to the third sibling, whose name still escapes me. One-headed blue is what we'll call him. As that all three of them are going to lead. Or maybe Kona and Wuk Lamat are going to lead. So the two-head thing doesn't need to necessarily be a creature with two heads. Two heads can be a duo. That can work as well. Because they're very on the nose, certainly in the Hanu Hanu zone, that Kona doesn't understand certain things that Wuk Lamat understands very, very well, and Wuk Lamat doesn't understand things that Kona understands very well. I really liked the again, it was kind of obvious, but that's fine, because storytelling should make sense. That Kona just doesn't understand. And actually, Kona sort of, for me, I'm trying not to offend anybody, represents a lot of gamers. And what I mean by that is, I very regularly, and I would say a majority of the people I've dealt with over the course of my career who are gamers are almost Vulcan-like in their approach to things. It's excessively logical, very practical. There's no room for the flim-flam, inefficient nature of some people and their whimsical ways. You know what I'm saying? You know what I'm saying? It's like, well, you should take this approach. I mean, you could browse literally any Reddit thread. Certainly, like, the ones about, like, relationships as well. Well, this is... You should divorce immediately. This is a boundary overstep, and the only resolution here is to dissolve this situation immediately and improve your life and do this and do this. You will be better off for it. It's like, well, that's not real. Sometimes boundaries overstep. Sometimes they don't. Sometimes they don't go far enough. It's a constant back and forth. And tug of war. And as somebody who's been married, well, been together with my wife for 20 years... It's an ongoing process, right? It's an ongoing process of where your limits are that isn't just defined by immediately, like, dissolving everything the moment things get a little rocky. That's not the situation. That's not the way people work. And in fact, much more joy can be found in resolution if you can figure things out. So yeah, it's Kona. The way they did this is Kona has a couple of moments here where he solves the Hanu Hanu reed problem, which we're getting to in a second, with magical ether juice. You just put a drop in and all the reeds grow, and he can't understand why anybody would bother with a ridiculous, fantastical celebration of dancing and walking and carrying and building boats and effigies and all these kinds of things when he can just bloop and it's fixed, right? That is clearly the more efficient manner. And it's similar with the moblins. He can't understand why the moblins in a creative capacity don't just build a factory. Like, why wouldn't you just build a workshop factory that can mass produce these goods? It's far more efficient than having some guy squirreled away in a house building something when we could produce 100 times more if we just got efficient with it and did things like that. He doesn't understand. We can do this way more efficiently. Whereas Wuk Lamat's the other way. Is like, and I kind of, again, I do this, and this is why I bring this up, is this literally applied to me 5 days ago, and I told you guys on the TDPs that I did Sephiroth for just the Wondrous Tales thing, and it's an old boss. I've done this boss, no item, min item level, no echo. I've done this boss legitimately, but it just so happened that with the way the gear was on my Black Mage, is it produced a fight that was down to the absolute wire if I could solo it. And I spent like an hour and a half there doing it and figuring it out and min-maxing the class and every positional movement. And so many people were like, why? You know you could just invite someone else and kill it in 2 seconds. I'm like, yeah, I can. But this is fun. It's inefficient. I know that. I'm not a moron. There are better ways of doing this particular thing, but this is just more enjoyable. It reminds me of the Top Gear scene I assume many of you have seen with Jeremy Clarkson, where they've got the 3 cars, and he's like, this car is objectively better. It's technologically more advanced. It's more efficient. It's a smoother ride. It does everything better. That car is also better, but I would buy this one, which isn't a smoother ride. It's not as efficient, but you know why? Because this one is just more fun. And that's enough. And it is. It is. It's absolutely enough. And I hope this in some way, if there's some sort of self-reflection to be had between Kona and Wuk Lamat, some people take a look and go, it's okay to not be excessively practical. I'm a very practical person. And there are times when I just enjoy doing things because it's fun. And I don't care that it's 2 hours of my time or whatever, because it's fun. I'm actually having this debate with my team right now as I'm painting a mural of the wonderful artwork you guys did over our subathon. And my team is heavily against it. Because they're like, it's just a waste of your time. We could get it printed. We could do this, this, and this. And I'm like, yeah, but this has the personal touch. And it's nice and it's fun. And I want to do it. And that's enough. That is more than enough. So that's good for me. So I like that. But like, I think right now it's kind of pointing to Kona and Wuk Lamat leading. Erenville still remains to be a mystery. During this whole exposition scene with Wuk Lamat, Erenville is just stood off to the side, creepily staring in and smirking. Erenville has a mystery to reveal. In the best case, it's some of the theories we talked about yesterday. Worst case, though, as I brought up, I really hope this is not the case that Erenville has been in love with Wuk Lamat ever since they were children, and because she was royalty, he didn't feel like he was good enough, and so he like took himself away from the situation. But he's always loved her, and he wishes he could be with her. And if it turns out to be something so simpy and garbage, for me, than a cool mystery of the origins of Erenville and his role in everything, I will be a little disappointed. I will be a bit disappointed in that. But let's talk about the second big point. If of all the things I did yesterday, this is the one that lit an absolute inferno under my live audience. And so we have to talk about it. Because Dawntrail has a mixed review, right? In terms of its story. Now, some of that is the dislike of Wuk Lamat. Sure. I'm fine with her so far. I'm hoping, again, they ease up on the naivety and ignorance that she shows, but we'll see. I don't hate Wuk Lamat, let's put it that way. It was the reads. So we're going to talk about the reads, but it's an overall topic of storytelling. I hope you know. I don't want... what I don't want is... I think this is a good topic of discussion for down in the YouTube comments there, and anybody who drops into the live stream. But don't focus on the reads, okay? Because that's not the point. It's about storytelling in general, okay? Are we clear? Good. Okay. So what happened is we do the festival. And there's a ridiculous dance. It's very goofy. It's funny. And we carry this boat over to this effigy. I think it's Quetzal. It might be Garuda. I'm not entirely sure. But either way, then we all ignite in a blue ether flame. And then laser beams shoot out the boat into this effigy, which then showers the zone in etheric energy. And they're talking about how it takes some of your life force, but it focuses and amplifies it and then restores the bounty. And what it does is immediately, like literally Jesus's tears fell on it, is it turned the dead reeds into like 6 foot tall, fully grown reeds. And immediately my reaction, and as it turned out, the reaction of many, many people, which is the point, was, what the hell? Did they not know, even though they've been doing this ritual for a long time, that this is the kind of thing that comes out of it? And the people are like, well, they can't see the ether. Like, even if you couldn't see yourself igniting in a blue etheric flame, you would notice that your plants are suddenly like 4 times larger and healthy and full, and your frogs are happy again. All these things. You would probably notice the effect, even if you didn't see the sort of magical behind the scenes approach. Okay, so I was like, what? Like, they would know. They would clearly know. It's not like they haven't done this ritual for a long time. And some people was like, well, I think I saw a piece of dialogue where they hadn't done it last year. I'm like, right, but they have been doing it. It's not like they've stopped for generations, which we'll come back to. And suddenly, like, everything just sprouts and happens and works. And people got into a big tizzy about this because not only was I not the only streamer who had this reaction, but a lot of people playing the game had this reaction. And then there was the contingent of, this is explained. This is all explained. It's inferred, it's implied, and there's some talk about it in the next dialogue scene. So I was like, okay, let's play the next dialogue scene. And then we have a conversation that says, we've let the boat and the symbolism of this ritual kind of fall into disrepair, and we're not going to do that again. That's it. That's kind of what they say. So from here, we can infer a bunch of things. So I will throw an olive branch here. It absolutely makes sense to me that there is an ancient ritual that used to be conducted that was used primarily because they knew that doing this ritual enhanced their crops and things. That's very relevant to the real world, right? Praying for the rain gods to come. We've seen all that, praying for a bountiful harvest, and it happening. People attributed that to a deity or some sort of ethereal force, whatever it might be. Totally relatable, understandable, and it's also very understandable that in the modern era, as technology has risen, communication has risen, cultural understanding has risen, and, you know, general understanding of the world has risen, is that this has devolved more into a symbolic party than its original purpose. And we naturally had our crops and stuff growing because it turned out that, like, the ritual didn't always need to take place and they grew anyway, into something that didn't really require a sort of spiritual approach which may ignite the etheric stuff. I could totally buy into that. That happens in near enough every culture of the world, is that you throw some sort of party or celebration that the meaning of it has been lost over the years. And I attribute this, I think, was very appropriate to Guy Fawkes Night in the UK. For those of you who don't know about this or haven't seen, say, V for Vendetta, this is an annual celebration in the UK. Still practiced, but it's definitely less these days, where people build giant fires, ideally in safe conditions, huge fires, and we have this huge, we call it bonfire, that's burning up into the sky. And then they make a person. They get some old pants and an old shirt, and they stuff it full of straw or paper, so an effigy of a guy, literally a guy. And then during the night, you throw the guy on the fire and burn the person. Now, that sounds really dark. And it is. Because it's the celebration of the attempted revolt of the people against a tyrannical royalty that went wrong. They were going to blow up the Houses of Parliament and failed to do so. And now there's an annual celebration celebrating that the tyrannical leaders got to maintain power over the people. And that has all kind of been lost. Now the event is like a good reason to get together, have some music, have a giant fire, still cavemen at heart, have some nice seasonal treats, and generally just have a good celebration and a good time. And the deeper meaning has been long lost to a lot of people. And then, unless you're the guy who stood there going, well, actually, I think you'll find that this night celebrates something. Like, yeah, no one cares. They're there for a big fire and a beer and a hot dog. That's why they're there. So I totally buy into all that stuff. So, yep, I can accept that. The issue was this sparked a huge debate of what you should infer, what you should imply, what was hard counted in the dialogue to dismiss some of these ideas that people are like, well, if you interpret certain things this way, then you would get a better understanding of what's going on. Well, the way they talked about it here, and then somebody else was like, well, actually, though, because the next dialogue says they didn't do this, this, and this. And it sparked a huge debate with people typing like massive essays. I don't know if Bex can give a rerun of the moment, is what people were talking about there. And this is what I said on it. As I talked about earlier, FF14's storytelling is like the pinnacle of storytelling. I mean, we hold them to a higher standard. And I was like, if this little scene of these reeds doing this thing requires this level of discussion because it's not been clearly... The context for what's happened here hasn't been clearly enough laid out, then it's not been written properly. That's what I would say. Like, if you need to say... go and find a line that was said offhand somewhere, but it was hard counted in a different dialogue, but you should ignore that because maybe that person didn't know this. And you're trying to... it's a jigsaw with missing pieces, and you're trying to slot pieces in that seem to fit, right? Well, I don't think this guy understood this aspect of it, or maybe that guy was new. And it's pretty clear to me. And then what it comes down to is in a lot of good storytelling, you should be able to guess the outcome. You should. There's a lot of people who figured out Jon Snow's heritage because the clues are all there. And if it's been laid down properly, it actually makes perfect sense because it goes, oh, actually, all these jigsaw pieces fit together. And it works. And we talked about this recently because there's a show called The Boys. I enjoy it. It's not amazing, but I like it. And they recently had a plot twist in it without spoilers. And there's a lot of hints and clues, which I'd figured out as well, as to what the twist was going to be. And when the twist was revealed, a lot of people are angry. That like, oh god, it was so obvious, you know, and then other people are like, well, I didn't guess it, and that's the point. The hints and clues are there if you want to read into it, and you're like a super fan or whatever. And you can go, oh, I bet that's what's going on. And in nearly all situations, when everybody can have an opinion, some people are going to guess correctly. That doesn't mean it was incredibly obvious, right? And you'll see this a lot in gaming stuff. It's like, it was so obvious. God, how did you not get that? It's like, you guessed correctly. Good for you. High five. The hints were all there, but also the hints were there for other possible outcomes as well, which is what other people might have guessed, right? And it's the difference between that, which is good storytelling, and something stupid like, say, Rey Palpatine, where all these clues and stuff and storytelling leads in one direction, and then they go, ha, but all that was just red herrings, literally everything, and it's actually this over here, and you're like, well, there was nothing leading to that. That's just poor storytelling. It's not working. It's just garbage. You literally went the other direction and then think you're clever because you just didn't use any of that information. That's terrible. That's not what you want to do. And I think this is one of those scenarios where I hope this doesn't continue, coming back to Dawntrail. With, like, if this would have just been written slightly differently, and then we could have had, like, the wise man, the seasoned old wise Hanu, or some mention of, like, well, long ago, we used to do, like, frivolous, you know, spiritual, religious, whatever you want to say, rituals to promote the bountiful harvest, right? And we haven't done that for a really, really long time. But this is what our ancestors used to do. And it used to bring joy and spirit to the people. And as our people are dispirited and, you know, mourning because of this storm, which has ravaged their lands, killed some people, is like, perhaps it'd be a really good idea to bring this ritual back, to bring and bind our people once again in unity of their original culture. Something like that would have had this. I was like, oh my god, this is why they used to do this. This is why this existed, and we're going to keep this tradition going. And it would also fit into the Dawntrail puzzle of we're doing a tour of cultural understanding is what we're going on. And that would have fit much more nicely, or some other route like that, like the wizened man is like, the young people have forgotten why we did these things, and this is what we need to teach them, and teach our younglings this way. Something along those lines would have been great. But it didn't go that way, and this is what led to a lot of people being like, ugh. So, although I'm not focusing on that specific story element, and there are certain things I can accept, I'm really hoping this isn't something that continues. I don't want another moment like I had in Stormblood, I believe it was, where Urianger, who's not a part of the story whatsoever, just randomly shows up in the desert to give you a doohickey to enable the next part of the story to continue, because they'd written themselves into a corner, and they were like, how do we get out of this corner? It's like, well, just have Urianger just show up with a doodad, and now it works. I don't want that to happen, because that's like when I was like, this is kind of going off the rails, certainly after Heavensward, right? So I'm hoping that doesn't continue. Right now, still no mention of Solution 9. Still no mention of Trolley Town, but I'm sure it's coming. So, I will see you tomorrow, guys, with yet another update. Alright? Bye-bye.